In 1996, part of Los Angeles has been overtaken by gangs and is now on fire. On a helicopter, two cops wonder why they bother coming here, so their superior John informs them that a maniac named Simon has hijacked a bus with 30 passengers. John has earned the nickname Demolition Man because of the destruction he causes when he goes after criminals. Once they're flying above the right spot, John attaches a strap to his body and jumps off the helicopter. The criminals immediately open fire at him, so he hangs in the air while shooting back at them. Then John lands on a roof and kills a few more men before bursting through a door to get inside. When a thug starts shooting at him, John escapes by sliding down the elevator cables and breaking to a window. In the corridors, John keeps advancing while beating up any criminal that comes after him without breaking a sweat. Simon sees him on the monitors and decides to puncture several barrels of gasoline. Eventually John finds Simon consuming illegal sugar on a desk. He threatens to shoot if the hostages aren't released, so in return Simon threatens to set the gasoline on fire. John lowers his gun and Simon lights his cigarette instead, only to drop it on the gasoline anyway. The flames grow fast and cause John to drop his gun, so he jumps on Simon to fight him hand to hand. The men exchange several blows and John clearly has the upper hand, yet Simon still refuses to tell him where the passengers are. Since the barrels are about to explode, John decides to knock Simon out and picks him up before running away. Soon the whole building blows up and crumbles. John manages to get out just in time, but he's scolded by his superior for causing too much collateral damage and joining a case that wasn't his. John explains he did a thermal scan of the building and only found thugs, so Simon was lying about the hostages. However, a fireman interrupts him to reveal they've found 30 civilian bodies in the ruins. Simon mocks John for not listening to him and John loses his mind, so the other cops have to hold him back. On the day of the trial, John is sentenced to 70 years of sub-zero rehabilitation. This means he'll be placed in cryosleep and his behavior will be altered by subliminal techniques. He won't be eligible for parole until the year 2046. After Warden William finishes reading the sentence, John is placed inside a pod, which is immediately filled with water. Then this water is instantly frozen. In 2032, Los Angeles, San Diego, and Santa Barbara have merged to form a megacity called San Angeles. The place appears to be a peaceful utopia, so Lieutenant Lenina is bored while she patrols the streets. At a park, a gadget emerges from the ground to paint the words "Life is Hell" on a sign, which immediately cleans itself. While the painting gadget begins to spark to keep people distracted, a periscope comes out of the ground to observe the area. It's being controlled by Edgar, the leader of a resistance society called the Scraps. They're planning to rob some food delivery trucks because their people are hungry. At the police station, Captain George scolds Lenina for wanting chaos to happen just so she has something to do. When she enters her office, she insults George and a machine gives her a fine for cursing. Officer Alfredo mocks Lenina for her obsession with the 20th century, calling it a bad example. In the cryopenitentiary, William unfreezes Simon for his parole hearing. However, Simon says the words "teddy bear," which releases him from his shackles. Then he attacks the guards, shooting one in the head with his own tranquilizer gun and kicking the chair to block William against the bars. The other guard asks how he knew the password, but Simon doesn't know and quickly brings him down with a few hits. Next, Simon removes William's eye with a pen and uses it to open locks. Soon the police station receives an alert, but nobody recognizes the code. Lenina checks the system and to their shock, it means murder. Live footage from prison reveals that the guards and William are all dead. Then Lenina looks at the prison records and discovers that today was Simon's parole hearing. She tries to look for his access code too, however Simon was frozen before the city implanted chips in the residents. At that moment they get another alert because Simon has killed more people on his way out and stolen a doctor's car. Lenina tracks the car pretty quickly, so they send a team after him. Meanwhile, Simon finds a CompuChat chat booth. He surprises himself by handling the keyboard like a pro and looks up information about Edgar, learning he's wanted for civil unrest. When Edgar's picture appears on the screen, Simon begins hearing a mysterious voice telling him he must kill him. The screen shows creepy images, but they disappear when Simon snaps out of it. Then he searches where to buy guns, but the machine only gives him a history lesson, causing him to curse and get a ticket. When the police finally arrive, they have to follow a tutorial because they never dealt with criminals before. They ask Simon to lie down on the ground, but instead he activates the sign's anti-graffiti program, which stabs one of the officers. Since none of the officers know how to fight or have guns, Simon easily beats them all up in seconds. Then he jumps on the police car and throws the driver out. The last officer does try to fight, but he's quickly defeated too. Afterward, Simon rips the machine's camera out and sings to mock the police. When he destroys it, the station system loses camera access on 6 blocks. Lenina finds a private camera on a building and the cops watch Simon mess with the police car to make it explode. In the meantime, City Governor Dr. Raymond is having a meeting with investors, whose faces appear on small screens. He blames all the city problems on Edgar and the Scraps, so he wants to do something about it. At that moment he receives the news of what happened with Simon, so he calls George and tells him to do whatever is necessary to recapture him. An older officer explains to George and Lenina that nothing that the police used to do could capture Simon, the only one with that achievement is John. They search old videos of him and the team is impressed by his work, But George considers him an animal. The officers point out that to deal with an old-style criminal, their only choice is an old-style cop. George gives in and authorizes releasing John. His body is pulled out of the pod in a big ice block and a machine slowly defrosts him. It takes him a few minutes to wake up and he's quite confused. Lenina explains he was asleep for 36 years, his wife died in the Great Earthquake of 2010, and his daughter's whereabouts are unknown. After John is told about Simon, he asks for a cigarette, but they don't make those anymore. Lots of things are illegal now, like meat, chocolate, and alcohol. This makes John curse, so he immediately gets a fine. He doesn't want to work for the police after they kept him locked up for so many years, so George tells him that if he doesn't cooperate he'll be frozen again. Then John washes up and puts on a new uniform, but he can't stop scratching his hand. They inform him that his code was implanted while they were thawing him. Simon doesn't have one and the cops can't find him because they never were taught actual detective work. George makes his computer analyze all the information they have and the AI concludes that Simon will start a new gang to set up an illegal substance lab. John thinks that's a stupid conclusion and thinks Simon will be looking for a gun, but George points out there are no guns in the city except for the museum. Then John convinces Lenina and Alfredo to come with him. He wants to drive the police car but all the modern screens confuse him, so he lets Lenina do it. Meanwhile, Simon enters the museum and heads straight to the armory exhibit. He pushes an employee against a display panel to knock him out, causing the rest of the visitors to leave the room. When he finds the guns, he punches a panel but it doesn't break and hurts his hand. As he starts kicking it, another employee comes to check on him. Simon grabs the guy and throws him at the display, finally breaking it. An alarm is triggered and the museum is evacuated while Simon arms himself. He uses a fire gun to break another display to get a more advanced weapon, however it needs time to charge. When two more employees approach him, Simon shoots them down with a regular gun and all the doors in the room lock up. When the police arrive, John notices the periscope on the ground, but it hides before anyone else can see it. The only tool cops have is a rod that stuns people, so John tests it on a civilian and effectively knocks him out. He tells his team to wait outside because he only needs 10 minutes. Soon John finds the armory, only to immediately be shot down by Simon through the transparent door. John quickly recovers but has to run and take cover because Simon starts shooting him again. As John jumps from spot to spot to avoid the fire, he finds two guns that fell from the display. When he has an opening, he begins shooting back at Simon, who is forced to run out of the armory. In the next room, the men exchange a few more bullets before Simon shoots a lamp, which breaks the glass floor as it crashes, causing Simon to fall into another exhibit. Simon shoots at the glass floor too to make John fall as well. The firefight continues for several minutes until the advanced gun is finally charged. John notices Simon changing weapons and jumps out of the way right before the laser shot blows up a hydrant. Since he loses his gun in the process, John then tackles Simon to fight him hand to hand. To his surprise, Simon can keep up with him this time. They exchange a few blows and use random objects as weapons until Simon steps in the water. John inserts the rod into the liquid and shocks Simon, who recovers pretty fast and retrieves his gun. This time he does manage to slow John down, creating an opening that allows him to escape. Outside the museum, Simon sees Raymond and tries to shoot him, but somehow he misses. When he tries again, he can't even pull the trigger. Raymond reminds him that he must kill Edgar, revealing he was the voice Simon heard earlier. Suddenly John appears with the other cops and opens fire, but Simon immediately runs away. Raymond invites John to dinner to thank him for saving his life. At the police station, John learns that this society no longer uses money, the only way to buy things is with a code chip. Since Simon is uncoded, he can't get food or a place to stay unless he cuts off someone's hand. George thinks they only need to sit and wait for another alert about a Simon attack. That night, Simon searches the area until he finds a hidden hatch in the park that says police access only. He forces it open and goes down to look for Edgar. Meanwhile, Lenina and John go to a restaurant, which turns out to be a very fancy version of Pizza Hut. When they sit at the table, they're served tiny portions that John hates. Raymond dedicates a toast to John and shares how he saved the city from absolute chaos and madness. He thinks John should appreciate the cryostasis sentence that has replaced capital punishment, but John explains that while he was frozen he kept having nightmares about the civilians that died during his last mission and his wife beating on a block of ice. He thinks capital punishment would have been more humane. At that moment John sees a periscope coming out of the ground and a mysterious man on a bike. He tells Lenina to call for backup and runs outside to follow the biker. Suddenly there's a small explosion that opens some vents and Edgar comes out with the scraps, ready to rob the food truck. While civilians run away in panic, John begins fighting the rebels with a metal rod. He quickly brings down two men and the third one puts up a fight, however John can still defeat him in seconds. A woman jumps on him so John pushes her off before stealing a weapon from an unconscious scrap. When Edgar sends more guys after him, John cuts a few ropes to bring a tent down on them. Edgar and his remaining men have no choice but to run away. A scrap manages to crawl out of the tent and John immediately grabs him, however he lets go of him when he notices that he's been stealing food. He asks about this strange group and Raymond tells him that the scraps are deserters who choose to live in the sewers. John snaps, thinking that people who are merely looking for food shouldn't be treated like this. Moments later, Raymond returns to his office and finds Simon on his chair. Simon has figured out that during his cryosleep, Raymond fed him lots of important intel about the city, like passcodes and access to the data grid. Raymond reminds him he was given that intel so he can kill Edgar before he starts a revolution, but Simon explains he needs a team to do so and gives him a list of criminals to be defrosted. Meanwhile, John takes Lenina to her apartment and she asks him to get naughty together. John is happy to agree, so Lenina brings 2 virtual reality helmets. When they put them on, John starts seeing visions of having dirty fun with Lenina, and the helmet stimulates his nerves to simulate the sensation. Frustrated, he shuts down the connection and asks to do it the old way. Lenina finds the idea disgusting since it can transmit diseases and reveals that people don't even kiss anymore. John tries to kiss her anyway, but she dodges him and kicks him out. In his apartment, John accesses the security cameras outside the museum and sees the conversation between Simon and Raymond. The next day, John apologizes to Lenina by giving her a sweater that he knitted himself. It turns out knitting was an ability implanted in him as part of his rehabilitation. John theorizes that Simon must have been given skills to be a better fighter and asks Lenina to check, but when she tries to see Simon's profile, she finds her access denied. Thankfully, she knows how to trigger a security override and finally looks at Simon's rehab program. As John suspected, he was implanted with several dangerous programs, like terrorism and weapons training. Since the software was developed by Raymond's company, the duo heads to his office. The conference room is empty except for Raymond appearing on the screens. John accuses him of working with Simon and shoots most of the screens, so Raymond blames him for the destruction of the museum. Suddenly, John appears next to Raymond, pointing the gun at his head as he tells him that nobody can control Simon. As Raymond orders Lenina to put John back in cryosleep, John insults him and the machine prints a fine, so John immediately shoots it. The shock makes Raymond's assistant pass out. Afterward, John convinces Lenina and Alfredo to ignore Raymond's orders to help him instead. They go to the hidden hatch in the park and John explains Simon has been hiding underground to avoid being tracked by the cameras. The trio goes down the ladder and explores the sewers until they find the scraps community. John finally can buy a burger and beer by paying with Lenina's watch. Eventually, they see a very cool antique car and this distraction allows Edgar and his men to surround them with guns. When Lenina calls them primitive, Edgar shoots a metal sheet as a warning. John recognizes Edgar from the truck robbery and wants to hear him out, so Edgar explains that the scraps are rebels fighting for freedom and getting rid of fascist Raymond. Impressed, John agrees with his ideals and informs him that Raymond sent Simon to kill him. At that moment, Simon appears on a platform with all the criminals that Raymond unfroze for him. They open fire at the scraps so everyone runs to take cover. At first, John uses a table as a shield, but he has to hide too when Simon shoots the special gun, causing a structure to collapse. While the rest of the thugs keep firing, Simon sees John and is about to attack him, but Edgar shoots first. The bullet causes the platform to break and Simon falls on the ground. Alfredo immediately tries to capture him, but Simon easily overpowers him and knocks him out before running away. John starts chasing him and the burger seller points at the tunnel Simon escaped through. He shoots a few times in the darkness, however Simon is going too fast and moves out of reach. Then John recognizes the tunnel as an elevator shaft and rips off a poster to reveal the controls, which gives him an idea. In the park, Simon comes out of the hatch and steals the police car to escape. At the same time, in a car dealership, the floor breaks as the elevator emerges, bringing John and Lenina with Edgar's antique vehicle. They burst through the door and drive like crazy on the street until they find Simon, who immediately opens fire at them. The bullets break the lights and the windows but don't hurt them. John shoots back and destroys Simon's tire, however the car's AI instantly fixes it. Then John makes Lenina drive while he climbs on the roof. Lenina never drove without an AI before, so it takes her a few minutes to gain control of the vehicle. When they reach the highway, the antique car hits the police vehicle and John jumps to change roofs. Simon opens fire, so John moves fast to dodge the shots, then Simon opens the doors to keep John stuck. However, when Simon tries to shoot him again, John grabs his arm and hurts him to disarm him. Now John can use the gun to mess with the door hinges until it falls off, but he loses the weapon in the process. John then reaches inside to grab Simon by the neck, so the AI takes over the driving while Simon tries to slam John's head on the ground. During the struggle, Simon reveals that in 1996 he killed the hostages before John found him, which is why they didn't appear on the scanner. After Simon punches him, a furious John pulls him out of the car and leaves him rolling on the highway. When John tries to take control of the car, he doesn't know how. The side of the vehicle gets scraped against the wall before John finally says the right word to access the steering wheel. Unfortunately, he still can't stop the car, so it ends up crashing into a big sign and falling into a fountain. Foam fills the car to save him and John has to punch the window to open the door. After Lenina helps him out, George and his officers show up to arrest him, but the duo ignores him. At that moment, Alfredo, Edgar, and the scraps appear ready to fight and John joins them after stopping the cops from attacking. At Raymond's office, he tells the criminals that with their help he'll finally create the society he wants. However, Simon is tired of him and orders his men to shoot him. The body is thrown into the fireplace and Raymond's assistant agrees to work for the thugs to survive. When Lenina and John arrive, two criminals jump on them, but in just a few minutes they're easily defeated. It turns out Lenina is an excellent fighter, and she even shoots a third man who tries to take them by surprise. In the office, they find the burned body and a message on the screens announcing that Simon is defrosting 80 more criminals. They only have 1 hour to stop him, so John knocks Lenina out with the baton to keep her safe. Once all the pods have been chosen and taken to the defrosting machine, Simon kills the medical staff. When John arrives, he tries to sneak around, but he accidentally bumps into a machine and Simon hears him, so John opens fire. A firefight ensues and Simon rushes to take cover. While Raymond's assistant runs away, Simon controls a huge claw to capture John, crushing him slowly to enjoy his suffering. As the claw spins, Simon keeps shooting at John just for fun. A bullet breaks a freezing hose, so John redirects the cold at the inner mechanisms. When Simon is about to drop him into a pod, the claw finally breaks and John is freed. Then Simon grabs the ice-cutting laser and tries to shoot John, who keeps running while things explode behind him. A barrel is destroyed and water is spilled on the floor. When the laser runs out of energy, Simon attacks John to fight hand to hand. After all these years, John is still an excellent fighter, but Simon's new abilities allow him to gain the upper hand. Once John is down, Simon grabs a metal rod and gets ready to finish him. However, John finds a canister of chemicals and breaks it on the floor. As soon as it mixes with the water, it completely freezes Simon. John jumps on the crane to avoid the same fate and kicks Simon's head to finally kill him. Afterward, the whole room starts to collapse, so John has to run as fast as possible to escape. When the cops arrive, John announces that Raymond and his program are over. George panics because he doesn't know how they'll live without them, so Edgar explains they can finally have fun. Lenina checks on John and he surprises her with a kiss, which she enjoys more than the helmet. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.